Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The sun painted warm streaks across the living room as Kenneth helped Chimamanda revise for an upcoming literature test. Her handwriting had grown more graceful, her voice more confident, and her eyes no longer dimmed with sorrow. From the kitchen, the aroma of fried plantains and egusi soup drifted through the air as Amaka hummed Adaora's old lullaby, one Chimamanda had taught her. The three of them had formed a rhythm that didn't feel like a replacement of what was lost, but something new, something sacred. Kenneth often watched Amaka and Chimamanda giggling over dinner or trading bedtime stories, wondering how he had gotten so lucky twice. Healing had taken its time, but it had come slowly, tenderly, lovingly. Every broken piece was beginning to find its place. It was on a day like this, one soaked in peace, that the past came knocking. Kenneth opened the door expecting the grocery delivery, but instead, standing there in worn clothes and puffy eyes, was Vanessa. She looked nothing like the woman who had once terrorized his daughter. Her makeup-free face revealed sunken cheekbones, her once pristine nails were chipped, and her eyes bore the desperation of someone who had been chased by both time and consequences. I didn't know where else to go, she said quietly, tears welling up. Kenneth froze. The memories of Chimamanda's bruises, her silence, her trembling voice flooded back like a punch to the chest. Vanessa continued, voice cracking. I'm not asking to return. I just need to speak to explain. Kenneth's fists tightened, but he stepped aside, unsure why his heart, once so resolute, faltered in the presence of old betrayal. They sat in strained silence until Vanessa finally spoke. I stole from you, yes, and I hurt Chimamanda, a sin I will carry to my grave. But my mother was dying, Kenneth. Cancer. I didn't know how to tell you. I panicked. I saw your money as my only chance to save her. Kenneth said nothing, only staring. Vanessa clasped her hands tightly. She died anyway, and I lost everything. My husband, the one you met, stripped me of all I stole. I have nothing left. I'm not asking for pity. I just want you to know the truth, even if it's too late. Kenneth's gaze hardened. He'd learned the difference between truth and survival tactics. Still, there was something in her voice, a crack that resembled honesty. So he did what few men could. He forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because he refused to carry her venom into his healing. But forgiveness wasn't permission, and he made that clear. You're forgiven, Vanessa, but you will never be a part of my family again. Vanessa left his house quietly that day, but her visits became frequent. She came bearing store-bought pastries, tried reading Chimamanda's poetry, and even offered to help Amaka in the kitchen, a gesture Amaka firmly declined. Kenneth told himself her presence was harmless now. After all, she had nothing. No power, no money, no influence. What harm could she really do anymore? Still, the unease lingered, particularly in Amaka, who had watched enough broken girls try to befriend their abusers in the name of turning a new leaf. Amaka noticed the way Vanessa's eyes never lingered on the joy in the house, only on the cracks she could one day wedge open. Kenneth didn't see it, not yet. But Amaka, whose eyes had seen monsters in the dark, recognized one wearing a mask. Vanessa played her role with precision. She cried at the right times, complimented Chimamanda at school events, and even gifted Amaka a set of teaching pens, saying, "You're doing great." Truly. Amaka smiled politely, but kept the pens unopened in a drawer. She didn't trust a snake, no matter how still it lay. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, Amaka found Vanessa's scarf draped on the back of the couch. She stared at it for a moment, then folded it and locked it in a drawer, not because it mattered, but because she needed to remind herself that invaders often start with small footprints. Chimamanda, now older and wiser, also sensed the wrongness. She's smiling too much, she told Amaka one night. Like someone who's hiding something sharp in their pocket. Amaka kissed her forehead and whispered, "Keep watching, baby. You're not wrong." Kenneth, meanwhile, believed his cautious forgiveness had ended the cycle. He maintained boundaries, never inviting Vanessa inside when alone, never speaking of the past in detail. But healing has blind spots, and love can sometimes soften a man's guard. It was this subtle vulnerability that Vanessa fed on. In front of others, she acted grateful, subdued. But at night, in her rented room, she stared at the wall with a venomous smile. "He forgave me," she whispered to herself, "just enough to let me close. That's all I need." She wasn't back to rebuild anything. She was back to watch, and to wait for the cracks she once created to reopen. And just like before, she wouldn't be working alone for long. The first time Amaka truly understood Vanessa's agenda was during a routine Sunday brunch. Vanessa had arrived with small chops and that same overly bright smile. Kenneth had stepped out to buy wine. As soon as the door clicked shut, Vanessa turned sharply to Amaka. "You think you won, don't you?" she whispered, her voice no longer trembling. It was steady, venomous. "You think he loves you for who you are?" Amaka's throat tightened. She stood still, not blinking. Vanessa leaned in closer, smile twisted. "Everyone has a past. Yours is just buried deeper. And I'm the kind of woman that digs." The moment passed as quickly as it came. By the time Kenneth returned, Vanessa was laughing and complimenting Amaka's cooking again. But the spell was broken. Amaka knew then that this woman hadn't returned out of remorse. She had come for war. Amaka didn't share the incident with Kenneth, not yet. She didn't want to sound paranoid or jealous. But that night, she locked her phone and computer, changed her passwords, and moved her journals to a safer drawer. Something told her that Vanessa wasn't just trying to tear her down. She was looking for something. Something that Amaka had spent years trying to bury under the ashes of who she used to be. The next day, Amaka sat alone in the staff room, staring at a photo of herself from years ago, a time when her smile was painted and her eyes were hollow. She'd come far, changed deeply, and built something sacred. But the past had found her again, and it was knocking. This time with company. What she didn't know yet was that Tochukwu, her greatest shame and most dangerous enemy, was already watching her, watching Kenneth, and waiting for Vanessa's signal to strike. Together, they would rip open wounds, sharpen secrets, and drag the woman Amaka had become back into the shadows of the girl she used to be. Tochukwu stood across the street from Kenneth's gated estate, half hidden behind a cluster of trees, his worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His clothes were clean, but his heart was dirty with vengeance. It had been almost a year since he left prison, and though the world outside had changed, one thing hadn't: his hatred for Amaka. He had watched her from a distance for weeks now, noticed how she smiled more, how she walked like she had nothing to hide anymore. But he knew her better. He knew the weight she carried. He had held it over her before, and he planned to do it again. His fingers twitched around the burner phone in his pocket, the one Vanessa had given him. He had waited for her to make the first move, and now, watching Vanessa step out of Kenneth's house with that sly grin on her face, he knew the game had officially begun. Vanessa hadn't noticed him until she reached the bus stop. He waited until they were both inside the same Kiki Napep before speaking. "So you're playing friendly ghost now," he muttered, eyes locked on the road ahead. Vanessa didn't flinch. "I'm not here to be a ghost," she replied smoothly. "I'm here to finish what I started." Tochukwu laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "And what's that?" "Seducing your way back into his pocket." Vanessa turned to him, her eyes cold and sharp. "No, I want to destroy her, the same way she destroyed me. And you? You want your leash back, don't you?" For a second, they said nothing. Then he nodded. "She doesn't know I'm out. She won't see it coming." Vanessa grinned. "Exactly. You take care of her. I'll take care of him. We'll split the ruin down the middle." That night, Amaka woke to a sudden chill in her room. The window was closed, the door locked, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like a second skin. She walked to the mirror and studied herself. Her body had healed. Her mind had grown. Her soul had found love. But her past? It was scratching its way back in. She could feel it, not in words, but in the way her shoulders tensed whenever her phone buzzed unexpectedly, in how she double-checked the locks, in the strange silence that now followed Vanessa's every visit. She went back to bed, wrapped her arms around herself, and whispered a prayer, not of hope, but of warning. God, if they're coming for me, let me be strong enough to protect the ones I love. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Vanessa appeared at the door again, this time with a bowl of pepper soup and a carton of juice for Chimamanda. Kenneth, who was out running errands, had asked Amaka to receive it on his behalf. Amaka opened the door slowly, knowing instinctively that something was wrong. Vanessa didn't speak at first. She simply handed her the soup, then smiled sweetly. I know what you did, she said softly. You buried her. The girl you used to be. You think because he loves you now it erases what you were. Amaka's hand trembled slightly as she took the bowl. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Vanessa leaned in close. You were a sex worker. Don't look at me like that. Tochukwu told me everything. And guess what? I have proof. She pulled a small flash drive from her purse and waved it like a magician's wand. Want to see yourself from back then? Amaka's heart fell into her stomach. She reached for the flash drive, but Vanessa quickly yanked it back. No. This isn't for your redemption. This is for control. You want this buried? You pay. Her smile dropped. You will transfer 150,000 Nigerian nairas every month into the account I give you. If you miss even one, this video goes viral. To your husband, to his daughter, to the school, everywhere. Amaka staggered backward, as if slapped. She couldn't breathe. Her hands clutched the doorframe like it could hold her whole world together. Why? She choked out. Why are you doing this? Vanessa's voice softened mockingly. Because you don't deserve this life. You built your peace on lies. And I want to watch it burn. The moment Vanessa walked away, Amaka sank to the floor, gasping for air. She didn't know how long she stayed there, the pepper soup forgotten by her side. When Chimamanda returned from choir rehearsal and called her name, she quickly wiped her tears and stood up, pretending to be fine. But Chimamanda wasn't 10 anymore. She could read people now. She looked up at Amaka and asked, Did that lady hurt you again? Amaka hugged her tightly and whispered, I'm fine. But the truth was, she wasn't. And for the first time since she left Tochukwu, Amaka felt that cold shadow rising again. He wasn't just a part of her past. He was now part of her present. And if she didn't act quickly, he would rewrite her future. Amaka stared at the account number on the piece of paper Vanessa had left behind. Her hands shook as she logged into her bank app and initiated the first transfer. Her savings, what little she had managed to build, was now tied to keeping a monster silent. She wanted to tell Kenneth. God knew she wanted to. But the image of that video, of her younger self, broken, bare, and humiliated, flashing across his screen, haunted her. He had loved her for her strength, her redemption, her courage. But if he saw her past like that, without context, would he still look at her the same way? Would Chimamanda still hug her so freely? Would the parents at the school still nod in respect when she walked past? She didn't think she had the strength to find out. As days passed, Amaka's joy slowly unraveled. Her laughter became forced. Her cooking turned bland. She began pulling away from Chimamanda's hugs and spent more time locked in the bathroom, staring blankly at her reflection. Kenneth noticed. One evening, he found her standing at the kitchen sink long after the dishes were done, just staring out the window. Talk to me, he said, gently touching her back. She flinched. I'm just tired, she replied, forcing a smile. Kenneth didn't push, but his heart twisted. He had seen this before, this quiet unraveling. It reminded him too much of Chimamanda, when Vanessa had been in their lives. He didn't know what the trigger was this time, but he vowed to find it and kill it at the root. What Amaka didn't know was that Vanessa and Tochukwu were already celebrating. They had agreed to keep the pressure steady, not sharp. Let her break slowly. Let the cracks show, and then hit her with the full storm. Tochukwu had even joked, when she falls, she'll fall so hard, he'll never trust her again. Vanessa laughed. And when he's alone again, I'll be right there. The ex he forgave, the only one who stayed. But what they both underestimated was the one variable they couldn't control, Chimamanda. She was older now, yes. But she was also sharper than anyone gave her credit for. And soon, she would begin to uncover what even Kenneth couldn't see. And when she did, the house of cards Vanessa and Tochukwu built would begin to shake. Amaka sat in the empty staff lounge, her eyes scanning the numbers on her bank app again. Her heart thudded against her chest as she scheduled the second monthly transfer. The amount wasn't just financially exhausting, it was emotionally paralyzing. She had never imagined that a past she had buried so deeply could claw its way back up through blackmail. The account bore no name, no face, only an anonymous label. But Amaka knew whose hands waited on the other end. Vanessa had ensured every wire, every transaction, went straight to Tochukwu's grip. Each time Amaka hit send, it felt like she was feeding her abuser. But worse still, she was starving the trust in her marriage. Hiding this from Kenneth wasn't just about protecting herself anymore. It was about protecting him, too. That's what she told herself to sleep at night. Kenneth, on the other hand, was growing more and more distant. Not out of resentment, but out of confusion. He watched his wife retreat from him, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Her laughter no longer lingered in the house, and her soft humming in the kitchen had vanished like steam into the ceiling. She barely touched her food. She pulled away when he tried to hold her. And most heartbreakingly, she had stopped praying with him at night, a ritual that once kept their hearts in sync. Kenneth tried to reason with himself. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe something had triggered her trauma again. But deep down, he knew this was different. There was a silence around Amaka now that felt deliberate, like she was hiding something. And that thought gnawed at him relentlessly. Chimamanda began noticing the shift too. It wasn't that Amaka stopped caring for her. She still packed her lunch, still signed her school slips, still asked how her day went. But she wasn't present. One night after dinner, Chimamanda walked into Amaka's room to return a book and saw her sitting on the floor, holding her phone and weeping silently. She didn't say a word, just sat there, her body shaking, her tears soaking the pillow on her lap. Chimamanda left quietly, not wanting to embarrass her. But later that night, she took out her journal and wrote, "Auntie Amaka is carrying something again. Not books, not chores, a secret." She didn't know what it was, but something told her it was big. And this time, she would not be too young to speak up. Deep in a smoky back room of a bar on the outskirts of town, Tochukwu leaned back on a faded leather couch and grinned as he refreshed his burner account. The money had dropped again. "Right on time," he said to the man next to him, a crooked acquaintance who had once helped him forge IDs. "Told you she'd pay. Guilt is the strongest leash." He sipped from his drink, chuckling at the thought of Amaka pacing her small apartment, scrambling to meet his demands. He could almost hear her thoughts. What if he tells Kenneth? What if Chimamanda sees the video? What if the whole school knows? Those fears, those cracks, that was what he fed on. But what Tochukwu didn't expect was how deeply Kenneth was starting to question her. And the moment that doubt festered into action, everything would begin to unravel on its own. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept him updated. She had become the snake in the garden again, gliding through Kenneth's world unnoticed. Though she had not moved in fully, her visits became more frequent. She brought gifts for Chimamanda, offered to do groceries, dropped off homemade meals. To the untrained eye, it looked like kindness. To Amaka, it was a slow invasion. But she couldn't confront her, not without revealing the secret. So she swallowed her pride, held her breath, and kept up the performance. Every time Vanessa walked into the house, Amaka's stomach twisted. Every polite smile was a battle. Every moment she kept silent was a sacrifice. But Vanessa wasn't interested in forgiveness. She was interested in replacing Amaka, just like before. Amaka's anxiety escalated. She began waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. She'd run to the bathroom and sit on the floor, clutching her knees. She even visited the school counselor under the guise of staff stress. But no therapy could cure the cancer that was growing in her home. Tochukwu and Vanessa were orchestrating her downfall like conductors in a symphony of sabotage. And the worst part? Kenneth didn't know. Not yet. But she could see it in his eyes, that glint of suspicion, that hesitation before he smiled, the way his hugs had grown shorter, less full. And she feared that when the truth finally hit the light, There would be no pieces left of her life to pick up. It was a Saturday morning when Chimamanda found Amaka's phone buzzing on the dining table. It was unlocked, something Amaka rarely allowed. A message blinked on the screen. Transfer confirmed. Waiting for the next. Chimamanda didn't understand everything, but she knew enough. She clicked on the bank app and saw the anonymous transactions, identical amounts, repeated monthly. Her young mind tried to connect the dots. Who was she sending money to? Why was she hiding it? Was someone threatening her? Her hands trembled as she closed the phone and quietly returned it. She wouldn't confront Amaka. Not yet. But she wrote it down in her journal. The person hurting her is not in this house, but they are close. Chimamanda began observing. She noticed how Amaka flinched at sudden knocks, how she paused whenever Vanessa's name was mentioned, how she no longer entered Kenneth's office, and how her Bible had remained closed on her nightstand for weeks. That night, she tiptoed to her father's study. "Daddy," she whispered, standing by the door. Kenneth looked up. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. She hesitated. What would you do if someone you loved was in pain, but couldn't say why? Kenneth leaned back, watching her carefully. "I'd hold them close," he said, "until they felt safe enough to speak." Chimamanda nodded. "Even if they were lying to protect you?" Kenneth's face changed, but before he could respond, Chimamanda smiled faintly and left. The question stayed with him. The next morning, Kenneth watched Amaka prepare Chimamanda's lunch. She looked pale, fragile, as if the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. He realized something he hadn't admitted out loud. The woman he loved was shrinking again, just like before. But this time, she wasn't shrinking because of him. She was shrinking because of something, or someone he couldn't see. And that realization hit him harder than any betrayal ever could. Because it meant one thing. She didn't feel safe enough to trust him with her pain. And that was a wound deeper than any secret. Kenneth stood by the window of his study, watching the light drizzle dance against the glass pane. He held a steaming cup of coffee in one hand, but the warmth did little to thaw the cold not forming in his stomach. He had noticed the transformation in Amaka, not sudden, but unmistakable. It was in the way she smiled without her eyes, the way she flinched when he entered the room unannounced, how she barely held his gaze anymore. There were days when he found her standing motionless in the kitchen, holding a cup she had long forgotten to drink. Other times he saw her whispering in the hallway, her phone clutched tight as if someone might snatch it. And the money, the unspoken bleed in their joint account that she had stopped addressing. It gnawed at him like termites in the foundation of a house built on love. Kenneth didn't want to be suspicious, but his heart, once open and whole, was being shut out again. And the walls this time weren't built by grief or distance. They were built by secrets. That evening, he tried to ask her again. As she folded laundry on the bed, he sat beside her, reaching out gently. "Amaka," he said, his voice soft, "I feel like you're drifting. Not from the house, but from me. If there's something, anything, you need to tell me, you can." Her hands paused mid-fold. She looked down at the shirt she held, Kenneth's old t-shirt, worn soft from time. "I'm fine," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's just stress. Work. Memories." But Kenneth could hear the lie. It hung in the air between them, heavy and sour. He wanted to shake her, scream at her to let him in. But instead, he simply nodded and left the room. Because even though his heart screamed for truth, he knew no confession born from pressure could bring peace. She had to choose to trust him. And until then, he would watch and wait, helpless and afraid. That night, Kenneth lay awake beside her. Amaka slept with her back to him, her breathing uneven. He stared at the ceiling, reliving every moment, the laughter they had shared, the promises they made, the nights spent praying side by side. How had they gotten here again? He thought they had outrun the ghosts. But clearly, a demon still lingered in the shadows, whispering lies, stealing joy. And the worst part was, he had no idea who the demon was. That kind of uncertainty breeds paranoia. Was it another man? Was it someone from her past? Or had their love simply reached its expiration date, like everything else he tried so hard to preserve? He rolled over, gently pulling the duvet over her. Then he whispered into the night, "Whatever it is, please let it not be what I fear." Amaka stared at her phone screen as her hands trembled uncontrollably. Her balance was low, far too low. She had delayed the transfer by 3 days already, hoping something, anything, would happen to make it stop. But nothing had. Vanessa's voice still rang in her ears. "You miss another payment. I show him the video. And this time, I'll CC the church group too." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. It wasn't just about the shame of her past life. It was the betrayal Kenneth would feel if he discovered it from them, not from her. Her legs felt weak. She sank onto the kitchen floor, back pressed against the fridge, clutching her phone to her chest like a lifeline. But she was drowning. The secret had grown teeth, and those teeth had begun to devour her life, one piece at a time. Vanessa, ever the venomous predator, didn't wait. The next day, while Kenneth was away on a business trip in Abuja, she let herself into the house under the guise of dropping off a gift for Chimamanda. Amaka tried to stop her at the door. "She's not here," she said, blocking the entrance. Vanessa leaned in, a smirk playing on her lips. "I know. I came for you." In her hand, she held a printed screenshot, a still from the video. "This is from 2 years before Tochukwu," she said with a sneer. "So don't pretend he forced you into it." Amaka gasped, clutching her chest. "What do you want?" she whispered. Vanessa tilted her head. "Oh, just your life. Or the ruins of it. Either one will entertain me." And with that, she tossed the screenshot onto the floor and walked away, humming. Amaka stood frozen for minutes after she left. Then she ran into the bedroom, locked the door, and screamed into a pillow. She had done everything, changed her life, served in her community, loved like she had never been hurt. And yet, here she was, a prisoner to a life she no longer lived. She hated herself for not telling Kenneth from the beginning. But would he have accepted her then? Could he have loved her knowing where she came from? How low she had once fallen. She pulled out her Bible, flipping through the pages in desperation. But even the verses blurred. All she could think about was the account she could no longer fund, and the secret she could no longer keep. Kenneth returned home to find the house unusually quiet. No Chimamanda watching TV. No Amaka in the kitchen. Just silence. He walked into their bedroom and found Amaka sitting at the edge of the bed, her eyes swollen, her lips trembling. "Amaka," he asked gently, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "I need to tell you something," she began. But before she could speak further, a knock echoed through the house. Kenneth answered the door, and there stood Vanessa, eyes teary, voice broken. "I'm sorry, Kenneth. I didn't want to do this, but I couldn't let you be fooled." She handed him a flash drive. "She's been sending money to Tochukwu. She's been helping him all this time." Kenneth's face went pale. "What?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Vanessa stepped inside, ignoring Amaka's frozen horror. "Check your bank records. The money trail is clear. I even found the transaction logs. She's been lying to you, stealing from you to fund the man who once tried to take your daughter." Kenneth didn't move, didn't blink. Amaka tried to speak, but words failed her. Her mind was spinning too fast. Her breath caught in her chest. "Kenneth, it's not." But he held up a hand. Silence fell. He walked slowly into his study, shut the door, and moments later, the sound of something slamming echoed down the hall. When he emerged, his eyes were red with fury. "Leave," he said to Amaka, his voice trembling. "I don't care where. Just not here." Amaka collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Chimamanda, who had just returned from school, rushed to her side, crying. "Daddy, what's happening?" she asked. Kenneth didn't answer. He walked past them into the backyard and stood there with his hands on his knees, gasping for air. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. The kind that doesn't just break a man, it shatters him. And inside the house, Vanessa leaned against the wall, a wicked grin stretching across her face. Everything was going exactly as planned. The rain pounded heavily that night, as if the skies themselves bore witness to the collapse of trust within the MBA home. Kenneth sat alone in his study, the lights dimmed, a glass of untouched scotch on the table before him. The documents and statements Vanessa provided were spread across his desk, transaction logs, screenshots, the printout of the anonymous account, and most damning of all, the beneficiary name, Tochukwu. His heart raced. Every number, every transfer amount felt like another nail in the coffin of what he thought was a second chance at love. He ran his fingers through his hair, feeling betrayed, humiliated, and broken. How could she, he whispered aloud. After everything, after I let her into my daughter's life, into my soul. Kenneth had forgiven once, deeply and blindly. But this cut differently. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, safety, and the shadow of the man who once threatened the only child he had left in the world. In his mind, Kenneth kept replaying their conversations, all the moments he had reached out to Amaka, offering her a place of safety, of honesty. Had it all been lies? Had she simply played the same game Vanessa once did? He recalled the way Amaka had trembled during the first time she told him about Tochukwu's abuse, how her voice cracked as she spoke about chains she thought she'd broken. Was it all a performance? The image of Chimamanda crying beside her just a few hours ago struck him like a dagger. He wanted to believe Amaka. He wanted to believe in love again, but reality screamed otherwise. And Vanessa, with her perfectly timed sorrow and poised regret, seemed like the lesser evil. He poured the scotch and drank, hoping the burn would numb the confusion. But it didn't. All it did was make the weight in his chest heavier, a weight that came with the feeling that he had been played. Again. That night, he barely slept. In the quiet hours before dawn, Kenneth packed a small overnight bag for Chimamanda. He didn't want to stay in the house that suddenly felt like a crime scene. When Chimamanda woke up and saw her father's eyes swollen and weary, she didn't ask questions. "We're going to Grandma's," he said simply. She nodded, even though her heart felt like it had been dunked in ice. She knew something big had happened. She knew it had to do with Amaka. But no one was telling her anything. As they left, Amaka stood at the corner of the gate, holding a small bag of her own, hoping for a word, a glance, anything. But Kenneth didn't stop. He didn't even look in her direction. And that silence? It screamed louder than any insult ever could. Chimamanda sat by the window of her grandmother's sitting room, her school books scattered before her, untouched. She had been staring at the same paragraph for the last 30 minutes. Outside, the compound bustled with life. Chickens clucking, hawkers shouting, the scent of boiling okra rising from the kitchen. But in her world, everything was muted. She missed Amaka, fiercely. The woman who had combed her hair before school, who left notes in her lunchbox, who cried with her after nightmares. That woman was not a liar. She couldn't be. Yet here they were. Her father hadn't told her everything. But he didn't need to. She wasn't a child anymore. She had read enough pain in his voice, seen enough betrayal in his posture to know that something horrible had happened. And even though she loved her father, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he had gotten it wrong. Unable to hold it in any longer, Chimamanda wrote a letter to Amaka, a real one, not a message or an email. In it, she said everything she couldn't say aloud. "I don't know what's going on, but I miss you. Daddy is hurting. I think you're hurting too. But I want you to know I love you, no matter what." She tucked the letter into her diary and promised herself she'd find a way to deliver it. That evening, she tiptoed to her father's study and tried to speak. "Daddy, do you think maybe she had a reason?" she asked. Kenneth looked up from his laptop, startled by the question. "A reason to lie," he replied, his tone sharper than he intended. She flinched, and he softened. "I don't know, baby. I really don't." Chimamanda didn't push further. But in her heart, she believed in Amaka's love. And she promised herself she would not let this story end without trying to make it right. Amaka, on her end, was staying with an old colleague from the school. Her nights were filled with tears, and her days with prayers. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The shame burned through her skin. She had hoped Kenneth would confront her fully, that she could tell him the truth, show him that it wasn't what it looked like. But instead, she was exiled without trial. The house that once felt like a sanctuary was now off limits. Her heart felt like it had been cut in two. Chimamanda's absence stung even more. The silence from both father and daughter made her feel like a ghost, unseen, unwanted. But still, she couldn't bring herself to confess. Not yet. The weight of that old life, the images in the video, the look Kenneth would have in his eyes if he saw it, it was more than she could bear. Vanessa strolled through the kitchen of Kenneth's house with the air of a woman who never left. She hummed a lullaby she once sang to Chimamanda, years ago, before her mask had slipped. The fridge was open, groceries were restocked, and she had prepared a pot of vegetable soup. "I figured you needed help, since things are unstable," she said when Kenneth returned from a long meeting. He gave her a tired nod, barely making eye contact. Vanessa watched him closely, studying the cracks forming across his face. Every sigh, every distracted blink, they all confirmed her theory. Kenneth was broken, and broken men were easier to rebuild in your own image. She made herself indispensable, offering to assist with Chimamanda's school runs, laundry, meal prep. It was subtle, calculated, the perfect reintroduction. Chimamanda wasn't convinced. She watched Vanessa with sharp eyes. The way her lipstick always looked a little too perfect. The way she always brought up Amaka in passing. It must be hard without her. But I'll help you through it. Chimamanda kept notes in a new diary. Things Vanessa said, things she did. She didn't have the full picture yet, but her instincts screamed that this woman didn't come back just to apologize. She had seen enough of life already to know when someone was hiding a dagger behind their back. But Kenneth, exhausted and emotionally raw, couldn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. Maybe believing Vanessa had changed was easier than facing the fear that he had once again lost something pure, something real. Meanwhile, Vanessa met Tochukwu in a quiet corner of an old restaurant on the outskirts of town. They sat in a booth away from prying eyes. Tochukwu wore a baseball cap low over his eyes. Vanessa stirred her straw slowly. "Is he broken yet?" he asked, his tone thick with venom. Vanessa smiled, sipping her drink. "Almost. He sent her away, just like you said he would." Tochukwu nodded. "Good. Now we make sure she never rises again." They discussed their next move, a plan to leak the full video if Amaka ever tried to return. "Her image will be so stained," Vanessa said. "Not even God himself could clean it." The two laughed, a quiet, conspiratorial sound that promised more storms ahead. And in the corner of her heart, Vanessa felt powerful again. But what she didn't know was that Chimamanda was watching and documenting. And sometimes the smallest eyes see the biggest truths. Vanessa sat at the edge of a dark alleyway bar in a dusty, unassuming part of town, her silk scarf pulled low over her head. The bar reeked of stale beer and desperation, a fitting place for two people who had thrived in the shadows. When Tochukwu arrived, his presence sucked the air out of the room. The same cold stare, the quiet menace. He didn't greet her with a smile. He didn't need to. Their partnership wasn't built on friendship. It was forged in revenge. "He's unraveling," Vanessa said, stirring her glass of dry gin. He sent her out. The little girls, quiet. "They're all drifting." Tochukwu gave a crooked smile. "Good. Now we make sure the fracture becomes permanent." There was no warmth between them, only shared purpose. And now they had momentum. Kenneth was vulnerable. Amaka was broken. Chimamanda was young and confused. And that, they believed, was enough. They discussed timing. Tochukwu wanted Amaka gone from public memory, disgraced, discarded, humiliated. Vanessa wanted Kenneth to spiral until he became a man she could control again, not with love, but with pity and guilt. "He still doesn't trust me. But he's tired. And tired men are easy," Vanessa whispered, her lipstick-stained napkin crumpled in her fist. Tochukwu leaned in. "She has one weakness. You saw it in her eyes when you showed her that video, shame." He smiled darkly. "Shame is more powerful than fear. It eats from the inside." Vanessa nodded slowly, watching his fingers tap the table in rhythm. "So we feed it," she said. "Keep her quiet. Keep him confused." It wasn't just vengeance anymore, it was theater. And they had chosen their stage. Outside, the night carried their whispers to the wind, but it couldn't carry the heaviness of their plans. What neither of them saw nor sensed was the man across the street pretending to fix his broken Kiki Napep, who had been watching them for over 30 minutes. One of Kenneth's discreet security watchers had picked up on Vanessa's patterns and had begun tailing her out of instinct. He hadn't heard the full conversation, but he had seen enough to report. As Tochukwu and Vanessa exited the bar, parting without even a handshake, he noted their direction, took a blurred photo, and dialed a private number. "Sir, something's happening. I think you should see this," the man said. Kenneth, still buried in silence and emotional fog, didn't yet know the war that was closing in on every side. But truth, no matter how delayed, always leaves tracks behind. And someone had begun to follow. Amaka sat at the edge of her bed, the cold air brushing against her bare arms. The room she rented was small and plain, just a single chair, a plastic wardrobe, and a worn mattress that sagged in the middle. Her hands trembled as she stared at the envelope in front of her. It was the 4th time she had tried to write a letter to Kenneth. The first one had been too vague. The second had made her sound defensive. The third, too guilty. And now, the 4th sat half-finished, stained with a teardrop that had smeared her words. "I lied, but not in the way you think," she had written. But what could she say that wouldn't ruin her completely? That she had once lived a life she wasn't proud of? That Tochukwu had taken her in, used her, recorded her, and blackmailed her into silence for years? How could she ever explain it in a way that wouldn't make Kenneth look at her like she was filth? She got up and walked to the mirror. Her eyes were red, her lips cracked, her posture stooped from stress and heartbreak. She barely recognized herself. The woman Kenneth had loved was strong, brave, and filled with purpose. Now she was a ghost. Yet, beneath the grief, a seed of anger began to bloom. Not at Kenneth, but at Tochukwu, at Vanessa, at the world that always made women carry the shame of their oppressors. "Why should I hide?" she whispered. "Why am I still letting them win?" Her voice cracked under the weight of her own restraint. She should go back, storm in, and tell Kenneth everything. Let the cards fall. But as she looked into the mirror again, a memory surfaced. Tochukwu's voice in her ear years ago, whispering, "If you ever try to rise, I will destroy you." And now, with Vanessa's betrayal added to the pile, the prison around her felt complete. Her silence wasn't cowardice, it was armor. That evening, she went to church. The pew was nearly empty. She knelt at the altar and whispered a broken prayer. "God, please, if I lose everything, please don't let me lose her. Don't let me lose Chimamanda." Her voice trembled. "And please keep him safe." She lit a candle and left without waiting for a response. Outside, the sky was dark and the street lights flickered. As she walked home, she clutched her scarf tightly, unaware that a familiar car had passed her twice. Inside that car, Tochukwu watched, silent, calculating. Not yet. He wasn't ready to act. But he wanted her to know he was near. Fear was his favorite weapon. And it was beginning to work again. The knock came just after midnight. It was soft at first, almost hesitant. Amaka, half asleep on her mattress, sat up in silence. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her breath caught in her throat. Another knock, louder. Then a voice. Amaka, her name, spoken with cruel familiarity. Her heart stopped. Slowly, she approached the door, peering through the peephole. There he was, Tochukwu, leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, wearing a smug smile. Her hands shook as she backed away from the door. "I know you're in there," he said softly. "Open up, or I'll open it for you." Fear wrapped itself around her spine like a snake. She knew he meant it. She didn't know how he found her, but he always did. She opened the door slowly, just a crack. "What do you want?" she whispered. He smiled, stepping into the frame. "To see you. To remind you who you really are." She tried to slam the door, but he caught it with one hand and forced his way inside. She stumbled backward. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. "Or what?" he laughed. "You'll scream? Call the police? Who will believe you now?" He took out his phone and played a muted clip, one of the videos. Amaka froze. "This is still with me," he said. "And I've made copies. You ever think about running back to that perfect little life again. I'll make sure Chimamanda sees it. Or better, imagine if she ends up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor. Please, she whispered. Please don't touch her. Tochukwu crouched beside her, his face inches from hers. You want peace, he whispered. Then stay where you are. Alone. Quiet. Obedient. And if you ever think about crawling back to that man, he stood, looming above her like a storm. I'll kill her. With that, he walked out, leaving the door ajar and the silence thick. Amaka lay on the cold floor, gasping for breath, her hand over her mouth to silence the scream that threatened to escape. The one thing she had feared most had come true. Her past hadn't just followed her. It had kicked down the door and promised blood. And in that moment, she realized silence was no longer enough. She had to choose, keep running or stand and fight, before it was too late. Amaka didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the ceiling, every whisper of wind outside her window made her flinch. The weight of Tochukwu's threat echoed in her skull like a funeral drum. She had known fear, known it in the clenched fists and dead eyes of her past. But this was different. This was terror anchored in love. For the first time, the threat wasn't to her body or her pride. It was to Chimamanda, a child who had already seen too much darkness, a child she had promised to never let be hurt again. As the pale morning sun filtered through the curtains, Amaka sat curled on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring blankly at her phone. Her hands hovered over Kenneth's contact, then moved away. She knew she should tell him. She knew silence was no longer a safe option. But Tochukwu's words were carved into her skin like shackles. Say a word, and I'll kill her. Later that day, a message arrived on her phone from an untraceable number. A video of Chimamanda walking out of school, smiling, holding her books tightly to her chest. A second clip showed her waiting by the gate for the car to arrive. There was no voiceover, just the footage. But the message was clear. I can reach her. Amaka's legs buckled. The video wasn't meant to be dramatic. That's what made it even more terrifying. It was calm. It was quiet. It was calculated. Like a predator watching prey from the brush. She rushed into the bathroom and vomited. As she rinsed her mouth and stared into the mirror, she whispered, God, what do I do? And for once, no answer came. Just her own broken reflection. She wanted to scream, to call the police, to run to Kenneth and confess everything. But what if Tochukwu made good on his word before help arrived? That night, when Chimamanda messaged her asking if she was okay, Amaka sent a shaky reply. Yes, baby, I'm okay. I just miss you. But she wasn't okay. She sat in the dark, every window locked, every light off. She refused to sleep. Instead, she stared at the door, waiting for another knock. She couldn't risk it. She couldn't risk Chimamanda's life. So she began searching for anonymous transfer routes again, preparing to resume the hush payments she had sworn to end. Her savings were almost gone, and Kenneth had already cut her off emotionally and financially. Her hands trembled over the laptop keyboard. She felt trapped in a cage built from lies she hadn't told, only survived. And as the clock struck midnight again, the only thing keeping her breathing was one desperate hope, that somehow she could protect the girl who still called her mother, without losing what was left of herself. Rain poured that night like the sky itself was weeping. Inside her tiny apartment, Amaka sat huddled in the corner, every light off, every curtain drawn. Her phone buzzed beside her, a strange number. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. The voice on the other end was low, calm, and unmistakable. Have you told him yet? Tochukwu asked. She said nothing. Good, he continued, because I still have more to show. She's growing into a very pretty young woman, you know. Amaka's soul seemed to leave her body. She gasped for breath, clutching the side of the table for support. Please, she whispered, I'll do anything. Just don't hurt her. Tochukwu chuckled. You already are doing something, staying away. Keep it that way. Then the line went dead. As the rain worsened, a knock echoed through the corridor outside her flat. Soft, deliberate. She held her breath. After a long silence, she tiptoed to the door and checked the peephole. No one. Just a small envelope on the floor slid under the crack. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside was a printed photograph, Chimamanda smiling in her school uniform, her braid bouncing behind her as she walked. And on the back, scrawled in black ink, "Go back to him, and she dies." It wasn't a message. It was a verdict. Her entire body went cold. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was life and death. Amaka curled up on the floor, sobbing into her knees. This wasn't love. This wasn't fear. It was war, and she was losing. Across the city, Kenneth stared out his window, his eyes tired and red. Vanessa had dropped by earlier that day to bring food for Chimamanda, the same kind of kindness she once used as camouflage. He had let her in, but kept the conversation brief. Still, her presence lingered like smoke. He didn't trust her. Not fully. And something inside him, something deeper than grief, told him that this story wasn't over. As he turned off the lights and walked down the hallway to check on Chimamanda, he kissed her forehead. "You're safe," he whispered. But outside, in the shadows near the compound wall, Tochukwu watched from behind a car, his lips curled into a smile. "Not if she comes back," he muttered. "Not if she ever dares to love again." To be continued in part 4. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.